So when I had my first DMT breakthrough, and I had the experience with the Serpent rainbow, or the Serpent of knowledge, that's what it was telling me, that like my psychedelic journey is not like some sort of wasteland of drug abuse, even though you may feel that way sometimes because society has drilled it in your head that someone who does psychedelics on a regular basis is bound for the institution or something. So I felt a reassurance in my drug voyage, or I hate calling it a drug, my psychedelic voyage and my musical voyage. It told me that what I was doing artistically and what I was doing with the psychedelics and the synergy between the two was on point. Like, whatever you're doing, keep doing it. It's working for you. It's working for everybody around you. You know, you're a better person for it, kind of thing, was sort of like the message, you know. And then, and as the Serpent entity left, it sort of said, like, you're always welcome here. Come back anytime, you know, which is a lie, because you're not always welcome there. Maybe you're welcome, you know.
It's fucking with your head.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I'll get this sap to come back. Don't you worry.
Yeah.
And so the Serpent turns around to his evil chums and said, yeah, he's definitely coming back. I've got this one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. And I haven't gone back that often, but when I have gone back, almost any time since then, it's been a much more turbulent experience. But I feel like the first experience still was so enlightening and beautiful. Like, I'm always in my mind preparing for my next journey. You know, I hope I have the courage to do it again, because I do feel like I have a bunch of, well, that comedy bit actually fueled me a bit. Like, it made me think, like, I've lost focus on that, you know, because his tattoos reminded me of a lot of like my journey, because I wear my psychedelic journeys as a badge of honor, you know, and I do, to my detriment sometimes. I'm too open about it. Like, I know I've lost friends, or have ruined experience or chance of making new friends by being too open about my psychedelic usage, you know, because people automatically write me off as a druggie rather than someone to be listened to or taken seriously. You know, and it's unfortunate because you know, well, I get that's how everybody judges everybody based on what they say, and you know, and when you first meet somebody, they're a blank slate as far as you're concerned. So you judge them on their looks, you judge them on their words, and if they make you feel uncomfortable, you're like, that's not someone I want to be around, and off they go. You know, so I've found that, especially in my professional life, I've kept my cards closer to my chest.
Oh yeah.
So, you know, to say,
yeah, you have to, really, because there's certain protocols that come into play, both written and unwritten. Let me ask you a question. Something occurred to me when I was watching that guy's video, in which he describes his very first couple of experiences, I suppose. A couple of things I wanted to ask you. The first thing is, he mentioned the idea of that his friend turned into a cartoon when he took not enough DMT. He said the world turned into a cartoon, and that, you know, he was interacting with the painting and all that kind of stuff. And I was just listening. I sent you another email with the guy he's a neurologist, and he's looking at orchestrated objective reduction, and also looking at the quantum mind and all that kind of stuff. And one of the things that he said was, which resonated with me, was that when we have normal everyday experience, that what we're actually, this is difficult to explain without going into a whole bit, but the idea of the world being a cartoon outline that's then filled in by detail by our brains. So we see the outlines, you know, we see the outline of a screen or a guitar, whatever it is I'm looking at, and then through the quantum process, after the event, that's all filled in, and you experience it in the moment, although the quantum stuff comes after that moment. It's something that you experience in the moment. And when that guy with describing his first experience said, oh, the world turned into a cartoon, I thought, I wonder if that's what that was. If that was the quantum processing bit of his mind, or the physical structure of his brain being removed from the processing. Have you ever experienced that, where you get that sort of... I've experienced it where where everything looks like it's made of Lego, or sort of it's not constructed the same. Have you had that?
I have, yeah. More frequently on psychedelics than in my normal mind. But yeah, absolutely. You know, and it is a strange experience. And I often think back to my childhood, and I do recall not just having like what I recall the moving like wallpaper kind of things, but I've had all these different weird like hallucinations when I was a kid, probably as my brain's developing.
Yeah.
Where I would have these drastic shifts in how I see reality, and before it came snapping back to normal. It always came back to normal, but there'd be these moments where I would imagine ourselves as Lego blocks or as like balls. I remember imagining everything made up of like these hard metal balls that were banging together all the time, and the idea of like that force of matter was like causing me great pain. Like I felt like I was between the two balls all the time, and I remember it used to happen to me, especially when I was experiencing a fever. Like if I was homesick from school, I remember like laying on the couch or something in the basement thinking like, what is happening to me? Like this is so messed up, but it didn't. And I recall maybe trying to elaborate to my parents on one or two occasions, and they would look at me like, that nothing makes sense what you're saying. So they would just kind of write it off as, oh, he's just not feeling well. But these memories stuck with me. And I remember and typically when I'd have other psychedelic experiences in my later age, I found myself having these very youthful type feelings. So they would remind me of my childhood. And that was what I think was happening. I was having these recollections of these perceptions I was having when I was a kid that were natural or induced by something else, internal, like I said, like a fever or something else happening in my body that wasn't normal. And then it would, relate to this future experience, so it is weird how that happens. And I do wonder about that myself, because like that like a low dose of DMT makes that painfully obvious that like things aren't what they should look like. And then what you start to see when you go deeper too is you start to see patterns inside things that don't look like patterns normally.
Yeah, of course.
It's almost the opposite happens.
Yeah.
Right, because like in that line of thinking, we're creating patterns all the time out of simplistic things, making them more complex. But what I notice is that things that normally look more complex look more simple. But if you look at the entire fabric, you start to see something much more complex than you've ever noticed at all, right? Which sometimes I think it looks alive. Right, like automatically the entire wall turns into like a face, but it's not a face of a human. It's got human characteristics in the sense like it looks like it has a couple eyes and a mouth, sort of. But beyond that, there's nothing normal about it. It literally looks like as if you're inside of a machine and the machine is interacting with you, and they're going, "Oh shit!"
Yeah.
It's like the Truman Show. Like you finally saw the cameras.
Yes. I remember that sort of thing from my mushroom experimentations many years ago. The other thing I wanted to ask, well, that's interesting what you say about. I think that might mean that what's one of the things that psychedelics do, probably the first thing that they do on the way to having the full effect, is that they dissociate you from the temporal aspects of consciousness a little bit. That what's happening is the normal process where you get a stimulation and your mind calculates for half a second and sends the information back to the start effectively through time from our point of view. That gets messed with. So what you're left with is the unprocessed sensory information, which you then have to. The process of filling it in is still going on, but it's all fucked up. So that's the first thing that psychedelics do. What I wanted to ask you also was, when that fellow was talking about the snake, and he was saying he's having this wonderful conversation with the snake, and it was all welcoming and all of that. Have you ever interrogated any of these entities to see if there's any veracity to their existence? For example, I kind of thought, well, if I was in that situation and I was still compos mentis and I still had a shred of myself to bring to bear, what I might do is I might say to the snake, okay, I think you're just a figment of my imagination. You're just an archetype that all human beings will experience because of the way our brains work. And I don't think you really exist anywhere real. But you can prove me wrong by telling me something or showing me something that I didn't know about previously that turns out to be real. Like, show me a treasure trove that nobody else knows about and I can go there and get it. Something that's actually tangible in the real world. That would be a test.
It would be.
Of the veracity of these intellects. Have you ever tried that?
Unfortunately, I haven't. And that's something I want to do. And that's where that's where the line blurs for me between courage and responsibility, because I want to do more DMT, and I found the last couple of times I did it, I had a terrible experience, and I'm not sure if it was who I was doing it with or if it was my intentions going into it, and I found I'm having a hard time fighting my instinct to do my best to fight the experience, So as soon as I feel the effects come on, I just I clam up and I'm just like, stop. I want to stop immediately. And then as soon as it goes away and I avoid it, I manage to avoid the breakthrough, I feel filled with regret. I'm like, you just spoiled an opportunity again, and I don't know what it is because I didn't, like I've always been a fan of Terrence McKenna and whatnot, but I didn't truly start paying attention until after I smoked DMT. And then he starts talking about the messages he talks about, how he says like, turn away from the wonder. Like, don't be distracted by the colors and the patterns and all this crazy stuff. He's like, turn to the side and go towards the darkness and dig deep through the realm, and I've never given myself that opportunity. Right. So far for me, it's all been like a carnival of like ideas, and I've only able to grasp onto a single thing. And then and the thing I'm grasping onto is the easy thing, right? Like I'm getting on the first ride I see in the carnival, and then I leave, and now I don't even get on the ride. I walk through, I hand my ticket, and go, never mind, I want my money back, and I leave, and it don't know where the fear comes from, except for the fact I think there's part of it's the way I ingest it. I think because I've always smoked it, and I've read recently that vaporizing is better, and now they make vaporizers that are made for vaping DMT, right? And there's a shop in town that sells them, so I've been meaning to go buy them, but they're expensive. It's like $200 for this vaporizer, and it's, but I mean, $200. I mean, if to buy a gram of DMT is around $200, right? So it's not like it's unreasonably expensive compared to the experience you're normally paying for. And provided this thing works, it'll work for your lifetime. So it's not like it's a good investment. But at the same time, in my mind, I'm going like, do I really want to invest in becoming someone that does a lot of DMT? Because I still have that societal shame where I feel like it's not a good thing to do, So I have to fight those all the time, right? Like I don't know. It's a strange one. I really do want to interact with the entities though. I want to go in like a researcher with a notepad, and be like, this is like, I'm here for business, guys. I really want to understand this, and because I've always, sometime in high school, I made an excuse with myself that my recreational drug use was all about creativity, so I feel this need to like come back with musical ideas more than knowledge. And for better or worse, and I have amazing musical ideas when I'm on psychedelics. Like I write whole albums in my head while I'm in a psychedelic trip typically, and I don't always, usually maybe one idea comes out of the hundreds I had one's days, and sometimes it's not even a musical idea. It can be more of a production idea, like something some effective, creative way of using delay or something, or a chorus effect.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I got to do it. I really want to, And like I said, it's on my desk in a container under my monitor there still, and I haven't had the balls to do it.
I think in my experience, what will happen is the moment will present itself. If you don't worry too much about the feelings of guilt or societal guilt that's put on you, and you just let it sit, there will come the perfect moment, and you go, oh, this is the moment, and you won't have to think about it too much. You'll be in the right company or in the right place, or something will have happened, and you go, well, that's obviously what needs to happen right now. So I think that's probably the way to think about it, is just to relax about it and not feel obliged to be the explorer that your instinct tells you want to be. I know exactly what you're going through, because I've been through that as well. And on the one part, I should explore that. I remember the only time I was offered LSD, I went through that whole cycle of guilt and opportunity and the recognition of my own hedonism. It all happened in just one moment. And I had £5 in my pocket. This was in the early 80s. I had £5 in my pocket, which I'd earmarked for a particular album that I was going to buy. And I was offered the chance to have LSD instead, because that was going to be £5 if I could get this tab of LSD for £5. And I made the choice, no, I'd rather have the album. And it was all weighing up all of those things, just in that moment. And the opportunity's never presented itself since. So, but I'm kind of open to it, and if it ever does, I don't know if I would ever do mushrooms again, because I had such horrible experiences at the end. But I think that was because we've talked about this before. I think I got some non-psilocybin mushrooms mixed in with my batch.
That could be it.
And I had a terrible terrible physical kind of experience that stayed with me for months. Actually, I felt for a long time afterwards I was not physically the same.
That's funny. Like it's funny because I've done much. Actually, I don't know if I've done more mushrooms or LSD. I can't tell, because it's gone through like waves. But my wife prefers LSD over mushrooms. But I found for me, if LSD for me is like more of like a guaranteed good time versus mushrooms is more of a roll of dice. But I do find myself more spiritually enhanced by a mushroom experience than LSD experience typically. But it's negligible. You know, I mean, you can read in forums people arguing all day long about which one's more spiritually effective, and it's personal. Yeah. It's all based on what you've experienced, right? So it's you know. And the other thing too, like we're talking about smoking it, is that it's very uncomfortable to smoke. Smoking DMT, it tastes like smoking plastic or something. Like it's not a great taste, you know. So that
that's what that guy mentioned, didn't he? He said that it was a kind of chemically taste.
Yeah, and the way he smoked it, they smoked it in what I forget what he called it, some sort of a bong, but what we call that device here, we call it a bucket. But either way, the mechanism's the same, and that's not the way to smoke DMT. Like it's you don't want the fire to touch the DMT. You want the DMT, like the way I normally consume it is in a meth pipe, which looks terrible. Like you see somebody smoking a little powder in a meth pipe, and you're going, I swear it's a DMT pipe. Like you know, like anybody cares. But the idea is that the flame doesn't touch it, right? You're inside of a glass ball, right? So you're heating a glass bulb, but still it gets too hot because I got no control over the temperature of the flame. Right, so that's where they say the vape, because I'm supposed to be vaping it, but I am smoking it because it hurts. But so when you vape it, apparently it tastes better, and it doesn't make you cough. Because if your lungs hurt and you're going through an experience like that, it's hard. Even though you may feel like you're out of body, you're not really. Like if someone were to kick you, you would feel it, you know. And it feels like your lungs are being ripped in half. It feels like your lungs are being ripped in half. So it's that I think becomes a big part of the negative experience for me. Plus, there's the connection between DMT and death. You know, Paul Smith, right? Is the comedian's name? I think it's Paul Smith. He mentions it too, that like he's like his buddy introduces it to him that this is the chemical you experience when you die in your brain, and there's the undeniable feeling that this is death. Like you do feel like there's a moment where you're like, this is it, I'm dead, and then you have to surrender to that feeling because you can fight it and then stop the trip, or you can surrender to it and then have the trip and have the breakthrough. And that's the hard part because the first time I did it, it was so foreign to me, right? That it was perfect. It was so perfect the first time I tried it that the setting was perfect. The two friends I was with were out of all the people I know, those are two people I would pick to be with if I was going to be with anybody, you know, and the music was perfect. You know, everything was just like bang on. I forget what I listened to the first time too. Oh, no, I don't. It was the Flaming Lips off their album, right. It was their album, The Terror, which may have been something I shouldn't have picked, you know, something so terrifying. But the song I was listening to was called We Don't Control the Controls, which felt so cosmically perfect, you know, because that's very evident. In a heavy DMT trip, it's very evident that we do not control the controls. That's not up for debate. You know?